Ну, первый не могу, а третий не хочу.
Я до речі, я менше.
Внимание, наверное. Включайте, включайте.
Спасибо, спасибо.
Когда они будут говорить, хорошо, электричество. Вчера приехал.
Yeah, but it's just from the organizers. We are still awaiting Minister Blinken. He's in charge of German, and it's likely to be here in 3 minutes. 3 minutes, you know. So please, a bit of your patience. Thank you.
Что, включать звук? Сейчас предупредю.
Association of International Law in putting together this event. The conference does, however, start on a somber note. As many of you may know, a few weeks ago, on 12 May 2017, the president of the Ukrainian Association of International Law, Professor Alexander Zadorozhny, passed away. For many years, Professor Zadorozhny was the undisputed leader of Ukraine's international legal scholarship, and he has educated many generations of international lawyers in the Ukraine. In the initial version of this program, indeed, his contribution to the event was recognized, and he would have spoken at this event. On behalf of the organizers, I would like to ask you to stand up in his memory and to keep a moment of silence. Thank you very much. I'm sure that the event of today will be organized and take place in the spirit of the contribution of Professor Zadorozhny. Let me take a few minutes to present to you the European Society of International Law, one of the co-organizers of the event. The European Society is the largest society for international lawyers in Europe. It was founded in 2001 when international lawyers across Europe, be they government officials, lawyers of international organizations, academic, practicing lawyers, felt the need to get together in a network to address and discuss matters of common interest to international lawyers across Europe and beyond. And the aim is to promote a greater understanding of the role and the limits of international law in the many conflicts and questions and challenges that face Europe. To date, we have attracted more than 3,000 members from over 100 countries, and the number is growing as we speak. For its members, we organize a whole range of different events. In particular, we try to set up in-depth exchanges between members on questions of common interest to international lawyers in Europe and elsewhere. Since the meeting in 2001, we have had annual meetings every year in a different place in Europe. So we have been in Geneva, Paris, Budapest, Heidelberg, Helsinki, Cambridge, Valencia, Amsterdam, Vienna, Oslo, Riga, and later this year, Naples, next year, Manchester. These are annual events where hundreds and hundreds of lawyers across Europe assemble to discuss common matters of common interest. And in addition to those events, we also organize smaller events in particular states with a view to address questions that are specific to particular states, like the one of today. And those events we can only organize, and we seek to organize, in cooperation with the national societies of international law. It's only when we connect to the national societies of international law that we can place the legal questions in a specific legal and political and historical context of the state. That we can address the challenges as they are perceived in a particular state and region. And it's therefore that the cooperation with the Ukrainian Association of International Law in organizing this event has been so critically important. The topic of today is one that highlights the importance of such cooperation. Clearly, post-conflict justice in Ukraine is critical to the history, the present, and the future of this country. And the program rightly puts the emphasis on perspectives of the Ukraine and the region. At the same time, clearly, transitional justice is a phenomenon, a challenge that is common to many states across the world, and that moreover is embedded in the common language and ambitions of international law. I would like to extend my special thanks to Dr. Ganna Yudkowska, Judge at the European Court of Human Rights, without whose energy and vision this event would not have taken place. Thank you very much. I hope and trust that today's event can lay foundation for a continued cooperation between the European Society and the Ukrainian Association of International Law. With these words, I wish you all a very good conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Ambassador of the United States of America, Mary Jovanovic.
Hello, everybody. And I'm so pleased to be here to help open this international conference on post-conflict justice in Ukraine. And I'm especially pleased to welcome Pablo Klimkin, the Foreign Minister. Please come on up. Yeah, a chair that has your name on it, so we're thrilled to have you here.
I can't let you know.
You know, as we speak today, hundreds of thousands of innocent people continue to suffer from the humanitarian crisis and continued human rights violations in eastern Ukraine and Russian-occupied Crimea. And the numbers tell a disturbing story. According to the United Nations, between mid-April 2014 and February 2017, nearly 10,000 people were killed in the conflict. And that's a lot of people. 2,000 of them were civilians, and more than 23,000 people were wounded. And the intensity of the fighting continues to increase. I saw an SMM report earlier this week that indicated that the number of civilians killed this year increased by 120% over last year. These are not good numbers. Moreover, more than 1.5 million Ukrainians have been displaced from their homes, and 3.1 million are without access to essential food, medicine, and other support. So we applaud the Ukrainian government for approving the plan for maintaining ties with the temporarily occupied territories, and we urge the Ukrainian government to move forward with implementation. Yet even as Ukraine and Ukraine's partners work to bring an end to the fighting, we also need to think about what happens next. Reconciliation, social cohesion. Because once the fighting stops, broken communities will need to be knit together so that a divided society can come together again. That's going to take a lot of hard work, and it's work that we believe needs to start now. I'm pleased that USAID is working with the Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Union to help prepare for this post-conflict transformation period. And I'm really pleased that all of you are here thinking about this problem as well. The cooperation that we've had with our partners has led to Ukraine's first ever human rights strategy and action plan. We were pleased to play a supportive role there. It's also led to the establishment of a Human Rights Abuse Documentation Center, which is working to document conflict abuses on both sides of the line of contact. The Helsinki Human Rights Union has also undertaken strategic litigation to establish precedents and to lay a foundation for post-conflict justice. As an example, the union is offering legal assistance to displaced persons seeking to document their Ukrainian citizenship. So last year, they helped a 16-year-old Ukrainian-born ethnic Armenian obtain a Ukrainian passport. Her parents were displaced from Donetsk after emigrating from Abkhazia, and couldn't prove that they were Ukrainian citizens because they had fled, of course, without all of their paperwork. With a passport, this young woman can now enter university, get a job, or rent a place to live. And when she turns 18, she'll be able to vote. This is really important work, and it needs to continue. At the same time, we encourage the government of Ukraine to fully implement the National Human Rights Strategy and Action Plan. It's a valuable tool for protecting the rights of individuals in occupied territories and of the internally displaced. It will also help to begin a conversation about what kinds of compensation should be considered as part of a broader reconciliation effort. For the next 3 days, you'll hear from others with experience in post-conflict settlements. And I know it's a legal conference, but I know that you will also be informed by the experience of those who have been so affected by this conflict. Last week, I was in Dnipro, and I was talking to a group of IDPs who had fled. It was a really moving conversation with, I got to say, many people in tears as they thought about an uncertain future. And not only the immediate future of how do I find shelter and a job here and now for my family, but the prospect of reconciliation in the future with friends and neighbors and family members who have become estranged, and in some cases even worse. They know that they have got to wrap their minds around this. They know that they are going to have to reconcile, but they know that they need to lay the groundwork sooner rather than later for reconciliation to be successful. But they don't know, how to move forward in that direction. And that's why I think it's so important what you're doing here now. Because all of you have a lot of legal experience, other experience with these kinds of conflicts, and you can provide really the millions of Ukrainians who have been affected by this conflict with ideas and strategies for how to move forward in a constructive way so that reconciliation can really take place. So from my point of view, this is a super important conference. I wish you a lot of luck over the next 3 days, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you can do. Thank you very much. I know it's close. That's right.
I give the floor to Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Mr. Klimkin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm honored and humbled, of course, to be there among lawyers, basically as a physicist by education. I came to value a unique feeling of engagement with, and of course, all kinds of interaction with many lawyers I met in my diplomatic and political life. And I basically got to a point that the law as a concept, as a philosophy, is not possible without lawyers. There is a famous Latin phrase about that, which I'm not going to come up again here, but consider it my welcoming point to all of you. It's simply great to be there. And of course, I'm so glad to get through the Friday morning traffic here in Kiev. It's not obvious, unfortunately. I will probably come up with a couple of points I believe are really important for understanding our common challenges. And I have here welcoming remarks from the President, so I will simply read it at the end of my remarks. In many, many years, starting with famous conferences in The Hague and Geneva, we were able to work out a unique system of rules, legally binding rules. And one of the most fundamental points for me, how we live in this world, is about our perception of this world as a rule-based world. Either it's about rules, or we are nowhere. And now international rule-based order is clearly under attack. We don't have any sort of consistent or comprehensive picture for the international law to be implemented. What lies, of course, very close to my heart, and why we've been fighting against Russia for all these 3 years, I believe more, but definitely in an open way. It's about one country, Russia, which fundamentally broke any kind of important international legally binding obligation. And it's the first time in the history of mankind that we basically don't have any clout how to, if you like, repair the situation. Russia is a permanent member of the Security Council. We are totally stuck with the Security Council reform. I've been working for many, many years, I can't remember, maybe for 15 years, in order to drive this reform forward. We are nowhere. And basically, the whole idea we are having now is to try to implement all kinds, and I literally mean all kinds of legal instruments to counter Russia. Unfortunately, as I've already said, we don't have enough ways, including not just the Russian membership in the Security Council, and it's right, but we have also a very famous Russian statement that Russia is not about to implement many important legally binding decisions, including the Council of Europe framework, because it does not feel bound by this decision. And the whole idea not to be bound to implement such decisions is a blow to the international legal system. So if we don't find a way how to implement the whole set of legal rules, and this is my point, we are basically nowhere. And because of that, along with all military deterrence and political pressure, the international law is fundamentally one of the most important instruments. Of course, along the line with solidarity, we have been enjoying. And because of that, we've been pursuing a very clear and very blunt strategy how to counter Russia, beginning with our claims before the International Court of Justice. One of them is under UNCLOS, United Nations Law of the Sea Convention. The second one is mainly about Crimea, about Crimean Tatars and Ukrainians who are under attack. Their rights is under attack. So it's about prohibition of racial discrimination. And the third one, it's about financing terrorism. Of course, we have, unfortunately, and I mean literally unfortunately, only 8 conventions we can challenge Russia because of the recognition of jurisdiction. We definitely need to transform the whole way how the international law operates here. And it will be my personal point and our point in the years to come. But I believe, and it's not a sort of point in appreciation of myself or our legal team, that we achieved the first but very important major victory in the world's highest court, International Court of Justice. The court ordered Russia to hold human rights violation in Crimea and reverse specific actions of its campaign of racial discrimination on the peninsula. And of course, with regard to the terrorist financing convention, the court clears the way for Ukraine to prove its case on the merits, although it declined to order provisional measures on the limited records available at this early stage of this procedures. So we will try everything, and I mentioned the UNCLOS, and we will be seeking an international judgment condemning Russia for violating Ukraine's sovereign right in the maritime areas around the Crimean Peninsula since 2014, ordering Russia to respect those rights in the future, and requiring that it compensate Ukraine for any irreparable damage that has resulted to date from its violations. So I believe we could and we will be successful on condemning Russia. But if you like, it's my request, you can consider it my plea to you. We've been discussing over many international conferences that we are basically at a kind of juncture in the sense of how we want to shape up international order in the future. It's the same way. It's your challenge to come up with good ideas and hopefully to implement these decisions and ideas in the future about how to shape effective international law system in the future. Because we have fundamental deficiencies in the system. We need the system not just to be adjusted. We have great bases, but we need the system to be reshuffled in the sense of its applicability, and I mean comprehensive applicability. And of course, effective way, how to be able to implement the system. So, and I mean, we need fundamentally widen up the jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice. And we need to find ways how to implement these decisions far more effectively. And actually I started with the point that I feel humbled and honored among the lawyers and the physicists. I remember very well how one of my professors told me a story many years ago, of course, about Albert Einstein teaching in the Zurich University, and once he had examined, distributed different tests, and said, look, you know, now it's about this exam, and one student raised his hand, he has his hand wavering and said, look, but professor, these are the same task you gave us 2 years ago, and I said, fine. But the answers are different now. I believe also legal answers are different now. And I'm very glad that you will be dealing today with many ideas how to shape up post-conflict legal reality. It's very important in the sense of how to approach it. We have a number of different examples. Of course, we all started these examples. It's all great. But what I got in my diplomatic and political career, I never believed in copy-paste approach. So in any kind, in all cases, we should come up with good solutions, political solutions, but also legal solutions, and all ideas how to impose, and I mean impose, law and order, because for the people it's about coming back to normal life. The people have been suffering now for 3 years under continuous break of indignity, imposing all kind of infringements of human rights. And for them, the fundamental point is to get back to normal life. But normal life also means law and order and the legal framework. how to sort out everything, which I very much hope. And basically, I'm really convinced that we will come to this point, which will, after we have real ceasefire, real security on the ground in Donbass, that we have the uncontrolled part of Ukrainian-Russian border closed, without all kind of weaponry and mercenaries and regular troops coming in there, without all kind of tricks, without all the gangs browsing around and threatening people, and now actually threatening also the OSCE, SNM. So we need law in order back, and we need legal rules back. And we need to come with credible solutions here. So good luck today with your deliberations. It is not obvious, and again, it would be great to get a kind of briefing about the results of today's conference. And of course, I would like to formally and informally express my gratitude to all organizers of this conference. And now I will read welcoming remarks from the President to all the participants. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure and honor to welcome you in Ukraine. My words of gratitude go to your genuine interest to the topic of today's conference. The one could not be more important. Indeed, Ukraine is the key battleground in our joint fight for the world order, as we know it. But Ukraine is also a showcase as regards the power of law versus the law of power. Today, the international law is challenged by a stakeholder that was entrusted by all of us to be exact on its principles and norms. Instead of promoting the respect for the rules, it blatantly violates its commitment and denies that it has committed a crime. There is no other legal qualification for Russia's stealing of Crimea and keeping Donbass bleeding, as well as there is no other way to restore the justice for all. It's possible only by means of restoring justice over Ukraine. Let us be clear. The international community has shown a unique level of unity and solidarity in Ukraine's case. But it's not only about Ukraine alone. It's also about the whole world order, which is at stake. That is why our determination today to enforce and respect for the rule of law is an investment in more safe and confident world of tomorrow. This is exactly what Ukraine is after in every field, including in the International Court of Justice. During the days of the conference, you will dwell upon how best to secure the very foundation of the international legal order. Whoever would dare to breach it again should understand inevitability of responsibility. I would like to thank again the organizers, the European Society of International Law, the Ukrainian Association of International Law, and the Ukrainian Helsinki Union for Human Rights for your timely initiative. I wish the conference and its participants constructive and in-depth debates in the interest of the rule of law and justice to prevail. The President of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko. And look, again, it's great that you are able to come together today. Of course, it's not about simple challenges and simple answers. And in many issues, you have to come up with new ideas and new solutions. So I wish you all the best, great atmosphere. Friday in Kiev, just try to enjoy the atmosphere and the feeling around Kiev in May. And good luck for you today's deliberations.
Okay. Distinguished guests, thank you for coming, and I cut my speech to save the time for this presentation and discussion. So I'm pleased to greet you all at this conference. I suggest that Ukrainian society now is in a difficult situation and for the difficult choice, and the support of the international community and international expert community is extremely important for us. We suggest that during this conference we will discuss not only pure theoretical issues of international law, but also have the possibility to focus our attention to some practical issues very actual for Ukraine now. We try to do the best to organize the conference in the most effective way. We divide our conference in sections to have more space for discussions. So I hope that you will have the possibility to discuss, to exchange the opinion, and I wish you the inspiration, creativity, and let me express the hope that today's Kyiv will enrich you with new ideas and new friends and new connections. Thank you for coming again. I give the floor to the judge for the European Court of Human Rights from Ukraine, Anna Evkivska.
Thank you very much, honorable judges, your excellencies, dear colleagues, dear friends. We started to plan this conference about a year ago, and key international specialists in the area immediately and enthusiastically agreed to come to share with us their experience, their wisdom, and their vision about living together in a country after violent conflict is over. We need to start building a framework for achieving peace and stability through justice and dialogue now, even though for us it's incredibly difficult to accommodate today some necessary concepts like dialogue and forgiveness in the middle of the conflict. But we strive for long-term peace, which is inconceivable without justice that will be accepted by all those who are today on opposite sides of conflicts. A peaceful future can be based only on mutual trust, and our task is to create this base. Post-conflict justice is usually viewed from two angles. The first one relates to the past, in a sense that by addressing past, a legacy of past abuses, we pave a road to stability through reconciliation. The second angle concerns the future, the social and justice reconstruction necessary after any violent conflict, because social order and justice systems will be severely damaged by the war. But we are now in between of these two angles. We are drawn into that gap between past and future, which according to Hannah Arendt, the proper habitat of all reflections. Today, quite unique in the history, we propose to start reflecting on post-conflict future whilst the conflict is not yet over. And in the words of one of our key speakers today, father of international criminal law, Professor Sharif Basuni, justice is seldom pure and rarely simple. It's nearly impossible to find mutually acceptable answers to difficult and sensitive issues we will raise during those 2 days, and we do not propose to undertake the ambitious tasks of finding the answers straight away. We will listen attentively to the best world specialists about how things were done in the countries they worked in, what was useful and what was not useful. We will evaluate the experience through lens of our situation, our needs, our possibilities, and will absorb and benefit those experiences that we believe will work the best in our country. On your behalf, I would like to thank sincerely our international guests who will be with us today and tomorrow, who came overcoming their personal difficulties because they understand how important the conference is. Thank you very much. I would like to thank wholeheartedly my colleagues, co-organizers of the conference, European Society of International Law, Ukrainian Association of International Law, and Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Union for their dedicated commitment to make the conference a success. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the organizing committee, I wish you a very fruitful conference, hot debates, inspiring ideas, and let me hope that together we will be able to accommodate the existing transitional justice framework to the current needs of our society. Thank you.
And I give the floor to Mykola Gnatovsky, the President of the European Committee for the Prevention of Torture, Taras Shevchenko, National University of Kyiv.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I shall be very brief, also using an opportunity to address you tomorrow in a general panel. First of all, welcome to this conference. I'm very thrilled to be here, and I'd like to thank, to begin with, wholeheartedly, the European Society of International Law, in particular, Andrei Nolkemper, Marko Milanovic, and the Ukrainian Helsinki Union for Human Rights for co-organizing this conference together with the Ukrainian Association of International Law, on behalf of which I speak now, because unfortunately, as you know, our president has died, and we are at a very difficult stage now. Nevertheless, this conference gives a hope that we will carry on. And in this respect, I would like also to thank Judge Ganna Yutkivska, who actually came up with the idea of this conference and who designed it, first of all, and who created the necessary link between the Ukrainian Association of International Law and the European Society. So your participation and your help, Ganna, is really fantastic and indispensable. For the Ukrainian Association of International Law, which was created shortly after the breakup of the Soviet Union as an association of Ukrainian international lawyers working for their independent country, this conference also marks a very important step in the development of this work with our European counterparts, with our European colleagues, because the Ukrainian state, the Ukrainian nation, the Ukrainian lawyers, the Ukrainian international lawyers, they are all looking for their place, and they're striving to find their place in Europe. And therefore, for us, it is not just this conference, and which actually deals with the topic of paramount importance that is so precious, but also this opportunity to be here with the best specialists from the European Society of International Law, and indeed from all over the world. It has been, the importance of the topic for Ukraine has been highlighted. I think it goes without saying that there's hardly anything more important nowadays. And I would like to thank all the experts, all the lawyers, all the judges, everyone who has agreed to come here, and also to those who actually submitted their abstracts to come here. Well, we had quite, I would say, quite a competition. By far, not everyone was selected, and nevertheless, their interest is also very important. And I know that some of the colleagues are here anyway, and for this, very special thanks. I think this conference presents a unique combination of deep theoretical knowledge with rich practical experience, which is also multiplied by various regional perspectives. Therefore, we are destined to be a successful conference, and I would like to wish you success. And finally, last but not least, I would like to thank the donor, the USA, the support of the United States Embassy, because all the ideas will have to be implemented, and of course, without you, it wouldn't have been possible. Once again, thanks a lot, and I wish everyone an excellent conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. And a couple of words. I would like to thanks to the USAID for extremely important financial support for this conference. I suggest that I'm pleased to have some understanding from the USAID about the importance of this conference, and really without your financial support it would be impossible at all. Thank you very much, USAID. Now we are going to start the plenary session. And the plenary session, Contemporary Challenge for Tragedial Justice, and I give the floor to Andrea Nolkemper for moderation of this session.
And the panelists.
Just 1 minute, ladies and gentlemen, before we can start. We have to get some logistics.
Yeah, excellent. Я переключил, да, но тогда чуть больше. Нормально стоит? Чтобы не двигаться? Чтобы, ну, если не сделать, то вырубить. И так. Ничего, что на бок не налазит.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are organized. So welcome to the first plenary session titled Contemporary Challenges for Transitional Justice. So the aim of this first panel is to address and raise some of the big underlying questions of the conference. In later sessions, we will look in more detail at legal issues of particular scenarios or particular legal questions. But before we can go there, we have to ask ourselves some questions that in a way are triggered by the title of the event: Post-conflict justice in Ukraine. So what do we mean actually with post-conflict justice? What does it mean to strive for justice in a situation where the conflict in some respects may be ongoing? What do we mean with justice? So many international lawyers are tempted to think of post-conflict justice by asking questions of criminal responsibility of particular individuals. At the same time, we know that questions of criminal responsibility are embedded in more fundamental, collective, and structural processes. There's also a question of justice in the eyes of whom? Are we addressing questions of justice as perceived by the local population or by a particular region? Or do we take the perspective of a wider context of international law and ask ourselves justice in the eyes of the international community? And do these perspectives necessarily coincide? Is justice from the perspective of international law, is that necessarily the same perspective as justice from the perspective of a particular population in a particular time and place? And then, of course, there's the question, what role for international law? This is primarily a conference organized by and for international lawyers. And definitely, international law has its place, has its role to play in post-conflict justice. But we all are very aware that the role of international law necessarily will be a limited one, and that we have to understand its potential and its limitations in conjunction with political and economic and social processes. So the aim of this first panel is to unpack, if you will, that notion of post-conflict justice in Ukraine, provide some broader perspectives and ask the questions that will help us when we navigate later today and tomorrow on the more specific issues. We have three speakers. Unfortunately, Pablo de Graaf, UN Special Rapporteur, was due to personal reasons unable to attend and participate in the event. Which leaves us with three speakers, but in my experience, three is more than enough, because that will give us the time to engage also with you as an audience in reflection and discussion. We changed the order a bit to build up what appeared to be a more logical sequence. Dr. Sarah Nouwen of the University of Cambridge will start off by addressing the challenges of transitional justice during conflict. Sarah, please. The order of things is that, in principle, each speaker will speak about 15 minutes, and that will leave us for about an hour for discussions.
Duše, děkuji vám za zaprošení do čaj duše o zbytkovej krajiny. Thank you too for inviting me to such a rich program, rich in people present and rich in topics covered. During this conference, we will be covering the International Criminal Court and truth commissions, vetting and cultural heritage, human rights law, criminal law, humanitarian law, perpetrators and victims. So what is it that unites all of these topics? It is the concept that is the focus of this panel, transitional justice. While I had initially suggested to talk about the challenges of transitional justice during conflict, it occurred to me looking at the program that it might be of more value to explore this theme, the meaning of the concept that brings us all together, transitional justice. For it is my proposition that the ambiguity of that term is not only a factor that unites, but itself is a contemporary challenge to the concept and practice of transitional justice. So in the next few minutes, I will try to illustrate this proposition by taking apart and commenting upon one of the most dominant definitions of transitional justice. When appropriate, I will analyze the program of our concept through the prism of this definition of transitional justice, so that we can work out what we are covering and what else we may wish to consider. I cannot apply it to the framework of Ukraine because my understanding of the Ukrainian situation is too superficial for that. However, I can ask questions to you. So I will pose questions that you may wish to consider whether transitional justice is actually a helpful framework for what you wish to do in Ukraine. And I hope that this exploration will not only help us to establish some common ground for our shared discussions, but also assist Ukrainians in finding their transitional justice process. But first, a word on the title of the conference and this panel. The topic of this panel is transitional justice, but of the conference, it is post-conflict justice. Now, my excellent Ukrainian sources tell me that the concepts post-conflictne pravosudya and perehitne pravosudya are often used interchangeably. But why then has the conference eventually chosen for the theme post-conflict justice and not transitional justice? Now, one possible answer might be that many lawyers, and after all, most of us here are lawyers, are uncomfortable with the concept of transitional justice. At an event that I recently attended, one German international lawyer fulminated against transitional justice as, and I quote, a dangerous concept, unquote. Where is the law? The speaker asked rhetorically. In that speaker's view, the problem with the concept of transitional justice is that it's far too interdisciplinary and that it does not make explicit which elements are actually required by international law. For others, however, that is precisely the attraction of the concept of transitional justice. When I did my fieldwork in Sudan on the impact of the International Criminal Court, it was dangerous to talk about the ICC, about international criminal law, or even international law. Transitional justice, however, became an acceptable term because it was seen as an alternative to international criminal justice. Similarly, when in Uganda a transitional justice working group had been established pursuant to the Juba Peace Agreement with the Lord's Resistance Army, the chairman of that working group defined transitional justice as, quote, justice involving short punishments, unquote. He too suggested that transitional justice is a form of amended justice, justice involving a compromise. And this is what transitional in South Africa entailed, as we will hear tomorrow from Justice Albie Sachs. A compromise in the interest of a society's transitioning towards peace and democracy. But that, in my German colleague's view, is precisely the problem with transitional justice. He would describe it as compromise justice. We'll get to the question of what type of justice Ukraine wishes to pursue, but let us first analyze the definition of transitional justice. Of course, with all concepts, there are several definitions. According to the United Nations, transitional justice comprises the full range of processes and mechanisms associated with a society's attempts to come to terms with a legacy of large-scale past abuses in order to ensure accountability, serve justice, and achieve reconciliation. So let's divide this into three. First, the full range of processes and mechanisms. Now, this is what transitional justice has been most often associated with. Say transitional justice, I say transitional justice, and you say Truth Commission. Trials, whether in an international criminal court or at a domestic level. Some people also think of reparations for victims. And the definition's second sentence in the report of the Secretary General actually exclusively then focuses on, on those processes. So they say They may include both judicial and non-judicial mechanisms with differing levels of international involvement or not at all, and individual prosecutions, reparations, truth-seeking, institutional reform, vetting and dismissals, or a combination thereof. Now we see almost all of these mechanisms reflected in the conference program, which is really testament to the excellence of the organization of this conference. The one notable exception, I would say, is that of institutional reform. And here comes my first question to you. Might institutional reform be a useful or even a necessary instrument in Ukraine? Do institutions have to be reformed, and if so, how? Now, in practice, these processes and mechanisms have become the so-called toolbox of transitional justice. The problem with the concept of a toolbox is that it is applied by mechanics, by transitional justice experts, who have the attitude, the more tools, the better. What is lost in this toolbox approach is the recognition that for transitional justice to do its work on the relationship between citizens and the state, it needs to emerge from a political agreement. It cannot be brought about by technical expertise alone. In other words, no matter how much technical expertise we here together bring, if it is not embedded in the political program, it's not going to go anywhere. The second part of the definition is a society's attempt to come to terms with a legacy of large-scale of past abuses. There are three things of note here. First is the little word a societies. In other words, transitional justice is, unlike, for instance, international criminal justice, not primarily concerned with the international society. As Professor Nolkemper already addressed, there's the question of whose transitional justice, and here it really is so it is a society. But perhaps this is a difference when we talk about transitional justice and international criminal justice. Transitional justice is usually to be understood more as the issue of a society rather than of the international society. The second thing of note is that transitional justice is usually associated with a particular type of abuses, namely human rights abuses of the commission of so-called atrocity crimes. Attempts to address corruption, treason, or terrorism are usually not considered part of transitional justice. The final thing to observe is the broad category of situations, large-scale past abuses. Now, originally the focus was on countries transitioning from authoritarian regimes to democracy. Then it was expanded to states transitioning from civil conflict to hopefully peace. Now, despite the definition's reference to legacy and past abuses, we now increasingly the transitional justice language also being applied before there is any transition. Think about transitional justice for Syria, even though the situation in Syria is clearly not over. Now, what happens when one applies transitional justice during an armed conflict? And this is something that Mark will elaborate. Either it is a technical exercise, what are we going to do afterwards, or transitional justice is not used to deal with defeated enemies, but it becomes an instrument to defeat the enemy. And this is what we've seen with countries referring situations to the ICC. The ICC has become a tool of countries in their warfare, and this is what many have referred to as lawfare. Now here is my second question to you. Which legacy of large-scale past abuses does Ukraine wish to come to terms with through transitional justice? I can see at least 4 types of answers. First, most narrowly, the Maidan and Odessa violence. But the instrument to deal with this seems to have been chosen already, namely criminal trials, which seem to be ongoing or halted, but an attempt has been made. For me, however, the question arises, why call this transitional justice and not just criminal justice? What transforms criminal justice in this context into transitional justice? A broader understanding would say, well, the international and domestic conflict that started with Maidan, spread through the country, was followed by Russia's annexation of Crimea, and then the armed conflict in eastern Ukraine. But as many people have already said, this conflict is ongoing. There is no transition yet. So what is the purpose of transitional justice? Are we preparing here for when the conflict may be over, but then we get a difficulty because the way the conflict ends will influence what type of transitional justice is possible? Or is transitional justice actually be used in order to force that transition in a particular way? The third possibility is that we deal with an even broader situation. The potentially decades of mistrust within Ukrainian society, between groups within the society, and between citizens and the state. In this context, the abuses that we focus on may be broader than transitional justice, traditional focus on physical violence, but we may wish to explore inequality, social economic injustice. Finally, an even broader approach would include dealing with Ukraine's past in the Second World War, of which Philippe Sands' documentary reminded us last night. In sum, given that we're all talking about transitional justice in this conference, we may wish to explore what situation transitional justice is meant to address. The third part and the final part of the definition is in order to ensure accountability, serve justice, and achieve reconciliation. Missing from the UN's definition is peace, but I fully agree with Judge Ganna that this is an essential element of the objectives of transitional justice. So I think it should be included. Now perhaps it is because we are reaching the end of the sentence of the definition of transitional justice, but here usually most attention is gone. What is notable in the discourse of transitional justice is that we usually forget about the objectives. Instruments themselves have become the objectives. In our program too, there's little attention for the goals. Why are we actually doing this? Why are we actually doing transitional justice? What do we want to pursue with it? Now for this conference, focused on technical expertise, that is entirely understandable, because it is not for technical experts to define the political objectives. But we can encourage our politicians to have that debate. When we take goals as the starting point and unpack these rich concepts, as Professor Nolkemper started to do, we see that many more avenues towards pursuing these objectives are possible than the mechanisms usually associated with transitional justice. For instance, accountability. Why should it be only criminal accountability? Can't it be political accountability? Justice, pravosudie. Now, if you use that word in the concept of a bunch of lawyers, it usually immediately leads us to the courtroom. But what about distributive justice? About the issues of inequality that usually fuel conflicts? What about legal justice in the sense of establishing the rule of law, ensuring that politicians are also accountable to the law? What about restorative justice, focusing on the relationships that have been ruined? And when we think about reconciliation, do we talk about reconciliation between two individuals, between groups within society, or between citizens and the state? And when we talk about peace, do we talk about negative peace, the absence of fighting, or positive peace, namely a situation in which all human beings can reach their full potential? Now my third question is, of course, which goals does Ukraine wish to pursue? Now, the answer is likely to be all of them, because these goals are like motherhood and apple pie. There's nothing wrong with it, and we can't have enough of it. The problem is that usually it is impossible to pursue all of these goals at the same time, not only because of a limitation in resources, also because of political constraints. And here we get to this point about the type of the transition influences what type of transitional justice is possible. If one has a situation of a negotiated settlement, as in South Africa, as Judge L.B. Sachs will elaborate tomorrow, it is impossible to say we need to have full accountability of everybody, because it's very unlikely that both parties to the conflict will sign off of a peace agreement if they know that this will result in a life-term imprisonment. So a deal has to be struck, the transitional justice deal, which is a political deal and which cannot be made by technical experts. In case of a total victory, a total military victory, it is possible to pursue full accountability. Think of the RPF in Rwanda, where afterwards everybody was criminally prosecuted, even though the justice system had to be adjusted in order to pursue that. But then, if one does that, the results of that justice will also be interpreted in the context of a military victory. In other words, for those militarily defeated, the reason they're being prosecuted is not because this is justice, but this is because they lost the war, a point that Marco will elaborate in his paper. Now, this is my final question to you. What type of transition has taken place or is taking place in Ukraine? Vis-à-vis the Maidan violence, we may say it is one of a total victory, as a result of which one could prosecute everybody as long as they are within your jurisdiction. With respect to the East, the scenario is not yet clear. Should one wish to aspire to a total military victory, or would a negotiated settlement be better? And how should the transitional justice aims be balanced with each other, for instance, peace and justice? That will be difficult, but to me, this is the essence of transitional justice. Justice in its broadest conception, including attention for peace and reconciliation in very difficult circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.